So we'll begin. Welcome, everybody. Good to see everyone. Nice group. What we'll do is we'll just begin with a couple of moments of purification. So what we're doing here is checking in with our minds, just to see if there's anything that we're carrying that might be a hindrance to making progress in meditation. So a lot of times we come here from work and we're, maybe a little wound up from that, or we've had some difficult discussions during the day, or some things that make us sad or stressed out. So when we come here, we can check in with ourselves, notice these things that we're carrying, and we find that we really can put them down for a period of time, so that we're able to work on the practice, and we're able to nurture ourselves without having these things as hindrances. And then we find that we can pick them up afterwards and work on them with a refreshed mind and spirit and heart, and work with them in ways that are more skillful and more as a result of wisdom. So with that being said, just consider anything that you might be carrying, anything that you might be holding on to that you'd like to let go. I'll sound the bell. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. And there is peace. So welcome, everyone. Well, we'll begin with our meditation practice, our guided meditation practice. So if you would like to take a minute to kind of get situated any way you'd like to be. Some people lay down when we do the meditation. Some sit in chairs. Steve likes the Siza bench, which there's, Meg has one over here. There's also extra yoga mats and blankets and things in the closet. So whatever you need to feel comfortable in your body while we do this. I just turned the temperature up in the room a couple of degrees, so it should be 70 in here pretty quick. So if you're at all chilly, hopefully it'll warm up. Right? So everybody feels pretty good? Yeah. Good job, Lou. Okay, come here, honey. Lou? Lulu. Come here. Come see Dad. Lucy. Come here, honey. Come here. Lucy. Mm-hmm. Already did this. Everybody's still here. Yep. Okay, Lou. Come on.
Daddy.
Come on. Come on. Thank you. Okay, honey. Good girl. You stay here now. You cuddle me a little bit. Sit down right there. Perfect. Okay. So, if everybody's relatively comfortable, a few things to check in with your body before we begin is just to see if you're sitting in a relatively symmetrical way, so that you're not supporting a lot of your body weight with one side versus the other. So just relatively balanced in terms of the body. It's helpful to sit with your back straight, but not tight or rigid, just vertical. You can tilt your head slightly forward, tuck your chin just a little bit. That helps take some of the pressure off the upper back and the neck. We close our eyes when we meditate, just to eliminate the visual distractions, the things that are happening in the room. And we let the breath come and go completely naturally. However it wants to move, we allow the breath to do that. And if it's possible to breathe through your nose comfortably, that will be helpful as we move through the meditation practice. But it's allergy season and cold season, so breathe however you need to in order to be comfortable. Okay? So with that, I'm going to sound the meditation bell, and then I'll begin to guide us through the practice. So just follow the sound of the bell as it fades into silence. And let the silence be an invitation to turn your senses inward. You can turn the mind inward and become aware of the sense of presence that you have in your own body. The feeling of just being here, of sitting here or laying here in this moment by moment, this feeling of presence. And we can let go of the habit of the mind, which is to be generally projected outward, focused on the outside world. Instead, we focus inwardly. We become aware of the stability, the peacefulness already present in the body. And with this sense of presence and awareness established, let's all bring our awareness up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. And just for a few moments, let yourself focus on any physical sensations that you notice in your scalp. So we're not looking for anything magical here, just physical sensations like temperature. Maybe there's a feeling of air movement. Sometimes there's a feeling of tingling on the skin, or maybe an itch or a tickle. So we're just bringing awareness to the scalp and becoming aware of any of the physical sensations, watching them as they come and go, as they arise and pass away. And it's quite possible that you would notice tension somewhere in your scalp, a little muscular tension. If there's any tension in the scalp, just let that go. Allow it to leave the body. And then you can continue observing sensations just as they are. And then from the scalp, we can allow the awareness to flow downward into the forehead. Let it pass down through the temples, through the eyebrows, and into the eyes. And so now with awareness focused here in these areas, again, we just open up to physical sensation. And we observe temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. Just observing as they arise and pass away. And if there's any tension, again, we just release it. Might notice that your brow is furrowed, or maybe your temples are tight. Sometimes the eyebrows are raised, or their eyes are squinted. So again, any tension you find, just release it. Allow it to leave the body unconditionally. And then as you continue to observe the sensations in these areas, you notice the deeper sense of peace and stability in the body. And this peace and stability is cultivated by bringing awareness to sensation and letting tension go without any reservation, without any negativity. So now from the temples, you can observe as your awareness moves downward into your ears. And see if you can feel that movement of awareness. There's kind of a soothing flow as that awareness moves from part to part. And then from the ears, observe as awareness moves forward through the cheekbones and into the face. from the eyes, observe as awareness drifts downward through the nose. Feel it passing through the lips and mouth and chin. And again, you're just observing sensations as they come and go. Temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. And if you notice tension, maybe in the jaws, maybe your teeth are clenched, maybe you notice your lips are pursed, or there's just tightness in the face, we let that go. Awareness of tension leads to release. And this is our practice. Just awareness of tension, let it go. Continue to observe the sensations and notice the increased peacefulness and stability in the body as we move part by part. So now from the chin, you can let your awareness move downward into your neck. Begin to observe the throat, the front of the neck. Move to the sides of the neck and to the back of the neck. Again, just observing sensations, whatever is there. And as we're looking for sensations, there's nothing that you need to feel in order to do this right. There's nothing you shouldn't feel. This is just whatever your experience is in this moment. You're just opening up to that, accepting those sensations. And then if within that you notice tension, you can just let it leave the body without generating any negativity. And then from the neck, we can move the awareness downward into the shoulders. Let it spread through the shoulders, opening up awareness to the sensations. And here in the shoulders, in addition to the normal sensations, you might notice a feeling of contact between your shoulders and the back of the chair or the floor. Or you might notice the feeling of contact between your skin and your clothing. So there are all of these sensations just to open up awareness to. And then we can let the tension go. If the shoulders are shrugged at all, just let that go. Leave the body. We can move our awareness downward from the shoulders into the upper arms. And with awareness in the upper arms, we'll start with the biceps. Just observing here, opening to the sensations, letting the tension go. In some of these areas, it might not feel like there's any tension present, but you can go ahead and let go of tension anyway. And often you'll notice that there is an increased sense of peacefulness and stability. So just practice with the releasing of tension, moving to the inside part of the upper arms now, from the underarms all the way down to the elbow joints. Then we move awareness to the back of the arms, the triceps area, observing sensation, letting go of tension, then moving to the outside part of the upper arm. Same thing, just observing, letting go, remaining present. Now observe as the awareness flows downward through your elbow joints. Feel it as it moves slowly down through the forearms, slowly down toward the wrists. And in each of these parts of the body, as I name them, just bring awareness to sensation and let tension go. Moving down through the wrists, feel that soothing movement of awareness. Moving into the hands now, feeling the heels of the hands and the palms. Maybe you notice a sensation of moisture or perspiration on the palms. You can move around to the tops of the hands. And the thumbs and fingers, just observing, no expectations, watching as sensations arise and pass away, letting go of tension in the fingers. And then you can bring your awareness down into the tips of the fingers and the fingernails. And here, just observe for a few moments. See if any sensations become known by awareness. Sometimes there's a very subtle feeling of energy or pulsation. Just observe. Just observe. And now from the tips of the fingers and the fingernails, we'll move our awareness up to the top of the chest. So in making that move, maintain your continuity of awareness. And then starting at the collarbones, allow the awareness to begin to flow down through the chest. And just feel that awareness moving through the tissues and muscles of the chest, all the way down to the base of the sternum. And then from there, let it move out through the rib cage, spreading out, observing the sensations, and meeting all tension with a complete and unconditional release. Just letting go. And then we can bring the awareness to the underarms. Observe as awareness flows downward through the sides of the body. You feel it moving all the way down to the waist. Observing, letting go. And then we bring awareness from the waist forward into the belly. And just be present in the belly for a few moments. Observing with the breath, the rising and falling of the belly, the expansion and contraction. Sometimes you'll notice the movement of the skin against the clothing. So you're just observing whatever is there in the belly. Let the tension leave the belly. Allow it to just hang freely. Continue to observe. And then we'll make another move with awareness, this time around to the top of the back. So we'll keep that continuity of awareness. We'll begin at the base of the neck and let that awareness move downward through the shoulder blades, through the upper third of the back. And we'll let that awareness move downward through the middle third of the back. Again, you're just observing the sensations of the body in these parts without generating any strong emotions towards them, neither liking nor disliking. Just observing, letting the tension leave the body. Moving down now into the lower third of the back, bottom part of the back. Again, observing and releasing, remaining objective. And sometimes in parts of the body we might encounter sensations that are particularly difficult or unpleasant. We might notice pain in the back or in other parts of the body. And these sensations can make it difficult to remain objective. And they can make it difficult then to let go of the tension around them. So it is helpful to become aware of the expansiveness of your own awareness, that there is enough room for the sensations of the back to be just the way they are, and that your awareness can be full and open, accepting, allowing those sensations to be just as they are, and then allowing the tension to leave the body. And then from the lower back, we'll start to move our awareness downward into the sit bones, move through the hips, feel the awareness moving throughout the pelvis, Again, awareness of sensation and a releasing of tension. And then from the pelvis we move downward into the thighs. Becoming aware of the thighs, we'll focus on the top surface of the thighs, from the hips all the way down to the knee joints, observing, releasing, rotating outward on the thighs to the outside surface, repeating that process, observing, releasing, rotating again to the underside of the thighs. Observe, release, let go. And then to the inside part of the thighs, all the way from the tops down to the knees, observing and releasing, maintaining this objective awareness and this unconditional release of tension. And we find that there's just an increased sense of calm and stability in the body as we move. Now from the thighs, we can let our awareness flow through the knees. Feel it moving downward into the calves, into the shins. Feel the awareness passing down through the shins into the ankles. Again, you're just meeting all the sensations of the body in these parts with awareness. Noticing objectively, letting the tension go. Allow awareness to move through the ankles, down into the feet. Observe the heels, observe the soles of the feet, the balls of the feet. You might notice perspiration or moisture here. And then we move the awareness around to the tops of the feet, observing, moving downward slowly into the toes, becoming aware of the toes, and then moving into the toenails, where with very subtle awareness we might notice a sensation of pulsation, feeling of energy. So we just observe. And then now from the toes, we'll bring our awareness once again up to the top of the head, up to the area of the scalp. But this time at your own pace, you can begin to move your awareness back down through your body. But try to move it through part by part in about the same way that we move through it together, just so no part is forgotten or left out. What you'll discover is that you can bring awareness to a part of the body, and in one in-breath you can become aware of sensations, and in one out-breath you can release the tension. And then you can move to the next spot. In-breath, becoming aware of sensation. Out-breath, letting go of tension. And moving slowly all the way down from head to feet. You might notice as you're moving through some areas where tension has reappeared. You may have let it go a few minutes ago during our first pass through, and you find that tension reappears in some areas. Now these are the places in the body where we hold tension habitually and where it tends to reappear on its own over and over. What we discover through our practice is that when we have difficult experiences during the day, things that make us worry or make us angry or cause us stress, that we respond by holding tension in the body. That we sort of brace ourselves against the difficulties of life. We hold tension in the body, and then maybe the mind has moved on away from the troubling thought or the difficult emotion, but the tension remains in the body. And the tension recreates the feelings of dis-ease, of agitation, of worry, of anxiety. So becoming aware of these places where we hold the tension habitually, we can release it over and over. And with that, we begin to release that sort of that hidden anxiety, that latent fear or dis-ease. So releasing tension over and over, we find greater peace in the body and the mind. And once you've had a chance to move through your body, let's all bring our awareness together up to the base of the nose. And we'll focus on the little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. Just focus your awareness here for a moment. And then we'll expand the awareness just a little further to include the rings of the nostrils. And then we'll expand just a little further to include the nasal passages. So we've got this triangular area of the nose that we're focused on now. And just be aware of the movement of the breath as it passes in and out through the nose. So breathing in, you're aware that you're breathing in. And breathing out, you're aware that you're breathing out. So breathing in, you know you're breathing in. Breathing out, you know you're breathing out. And you have all of your attention focused on this triangular area of the nose. As you're breathing in, try to stay with the breath for its full duration. So observe as it begins and then it slows and pauses. And it reverses direction and becomes the next out-breath. And you stay with the out-breath, observe as it begins. And as it slows and pauses, reverses direction and becomes the next in-breath. So we are attentively aware of the breath, staying with the full in-breath, staying with the full out-breath. Aware that this is an in-breath, aware that this is an out-breath. And as you're following the breath in this triangular area of the nose, you can open up to the feeling of touch anywhere in this triangular area of the nose. You'll notice as the breath passes through, there is, in some areas, just a feeling of touch. As the air passes through or passes over the skin, just observe the feeling of touch, still aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. And then focusing on the feeling of touch, you may notice that there are subtle sensations within it. Breathing in, the air can be cooler. And then breathing out, the air can be warmer. Breathing in, the air can feel drier. Breathing out, the air can feel a bit more moist. So we are keeping the mind focused on the triangular area of the nose, the movement of the breath, and the touch and sensations of the breath. You may notice that some breaths are a little longer than others. Some are a little shorter. Sometimes the breath is a bit more deep. Sometimes it's more shallow. If you're breathing through your nose, you may notice more air moving through the right nostril or more air moving through the left nostril. So you're bringing your awareness to focus on all of the different sensations and aspects of the breath. And as we do this, oftentimes we'll become aware of something that distracts the mind away from the breath. Oftentimes it'll happen as a sound. We'll hear a sound in the room or maybe outside on the street, and the mind moves to that temporarily. In the moment you become aware of a distraction pulling the mind away from the nose, in that moment, simply guide your awareness back to the breath. There's no problem with distractions, nothing wrong, but right now we're focusing on the breath. So with each distraction that we notice, we just return to the breath. And what we do in the process is we strengthen the ability of our awareness to remain focused on one place. And as you observe, sometimes you'll notice a distraction in the form of a strong physical sensation, sometimes fatigue or discomfort in the body. If you notice these distractions, again, in the moment you notice, just guide the awareness back to the breath. There's nothing wrong with distractions. They're a natural part of meditation. The key is in what we do with them. At some point we notice, and at some point we guide the awareness back to the breath. And we just let go of whatever the distraction was. There's no need to hang on to it. So we remain focused, and sometimes we'll discover distractions come up as just random thoughts in the mind. An image, remembering a conversation, planning something. If you notice this type of distraction, in the same way, in the moment of noticing, just guide the awareness back to the breath. You'll find that the thoughts take care of themselves. Just refocus on that triangular area of the nose, on the movement of the breath in and out, and on the touch and sensations of the breath. Every time you notice a distraction and guide the mind back to the breath is a wonderful moment of progress in the practice. So let's just do this together in silence for just a few minutes. Just stay focused, returning again and again. And in a few minutes I'll sound the bell to end the meditation. just take your time coming out of the meditation. Take as much time as you need. Feel free to stand up or stretch. If anybody's interested, there's tea in the kitchen, in the air pot, and there's cups, so help yourself. Or use the restroom, whatever you'd like to do. And we'll just break for about 1 minute before we continue on with the teaching. So it's good to get a little movement in the body. And it's also good to keep that feeling of calm abiding going. That's good.
To make myself.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't want to. Sometimes you just don't want to. That was wonderful. Well, Steve, you've been using that bench for a while now. How are you liking it?
Oh, yeah.
It's really nice.
You like it?
Yeah, I really like the position of the back.
Otherwise, I love it.
It's kind of neat how it just naturally positions you just right.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to be that nice.
Yeah, they're just great.
Kind of like mod looking, you know.
I like them.
them.
I've used them quite a bit. My son prefers them. He pretty much uses those exclusively. So, and he's a daily meditator as well. Quite a few hours usually. So, all right. Did I can't remember if I handed out morning recitations last week. Did that get, I did hand that out? Okay, so then there's a few people who didn't get morning recitations. Steve needs one. There's the whole packet. Meg, you got a morning recitation.
I do.
You handed out last week, didn't you?
No, I need one.
Five mindfulness training. Okay. So anyone who needs one?
Oh, we can let them move it now.
I should have. Yes, I should have. You want to see how? Yeah, thanks, Steve. First I didn't learn
I
how.
think Norma needs one. Yeah, feel free to turn the lights on so that you can see.
Give me Dave, I had one, but I bet you I left it at home. Let's see, is this the one?
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Oh,
I was reading, I think it was the one about the bubble in the water, because I knew we covered that.
yep, we did that practice last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a good one.
Yeah, missed out on about the bubble in the water.
We missed the bubble in the water.
You missed the bubbles in the water. You'll just have to stick around.
For
and-
another year.
I was thinking that when we were at that wedding, you know.
We'll do it again. We'll do it again. So,
We can go back and listen to it.
well, I have a little poem for you as we're, as people are coming back into the room. So this is a poem by Dorothy Hunt.
Oh, that helps. Oh, gee.
Amazing what a difference
And
it
then
is.
there was light.
So this is a poem by Dorothy Hunt. It's called Peace is This Moment Without Judgment. So she says, do you think peace requires an end to war? Or tigers eating only vegetables? Does peace require an absence from your boss, your spouse, yourself? Do you think peace will come from some other place than here, some other time than now, in some other heart than yours? Peace is this moment without judgment. That is all. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Peace is this moment without thinking that it should be some other way, that you should feel some other thing, that your life should unfold according to your plans. Peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. So, I love that poem by Dorothy Hunt.
I didn't know whether you had one of these, because I didn't.
Very beautiful.
Cheryl, I'll take these one. Morning, good morning.
It's different than last week.
We finished last week.
I think, and I think I handed out at the end of last week, that handout, Morning Recitations.
Because I was looking at mine.
But I've got one more, if anybody else
I'll get back to
didn't get one. So there we go.
Because I don't remember seeing this.
All right. Well, and I had handed out quite a few things over the last 2 weeks, so it's not surprising. But before we started on the material on the morning recitations, I sent out the November newsletter, and I wanted to read to you part of the article, just to kind of set in focus one of the things that we're working on with our morning recitations. So this is from the newsletter, calming the mind, or calming the body and quieting the mind. There's a word in the Pali language, papancha, which means mental proliferation. What this term refers to is the tendency of the mind to move from one thought to another and another and another. Bhikkhu Nanananda defines papancha as conceptualization of the world through the use of ever-expanding language and concepts. We imagine conversations that will never happen. We imagine troubling worst-case scenarios that will never occur. And most of the time, all of this happens unconsciously. The other thing that happens unconsciously is that we are reacting to all these little mental proliferations. If all of our mental proliferations were pleasant or uplifting, the reactions wouldn't be a problem. The reality, however, is that many of our mental proliferations are unsettling. The resulting reactions are things like tightening of the body, tightening of the muscles in the body, small blood pressure increases, restricted breathing, and other stress-related physiological responses. And the bottom line of all of this is that we are left feeling stressed, anxious, uneasy, often in such subtle ways that we don't notice them at the surface level of consciousness. But we feel them, and we react to them constantly. Fortunately, we have a wonderful tool for working with papancha, our mental proliferations, and that tool is mindfulness-based meditation. Our practice is to develop an objective, onlooking quality of awareness of what is going on in the mind and body in the present moment, from moment to moment. In this way, we can observe the thoughts in the mind, the mental proliferations, and how the body reacts and responds. We have a series of thoughts. The body reacts with a stress response. The stress response shapes the next round of thoughts, and the papancha cycle goes on. But when we bring mindful awareness to the process, we interrupt the constant flow of thoughts and reactions. The result is a feeling of peacefulness, and the result is the cycle of mental proliferation is broken. Through practice, we learn to unwind the cycles of papancha, leading to dis-ease, and we move ever closer to the peace and stability of mind and body. So that was in the November newsletter. If you're signed up for it, you've received this. And if you haven't signed up for it, you can sign up out front on the table. There's a sign-up sheet for it. But I wanted to share that because really what we've been talking about over the last few weeks is the internal narratives of the mind, the stories we tell ourselves, the little scenarios that we're making up, the things that we're thinking about that are particularly frightening or troublesome. We tell ourselves these stories over and over, And we just do it so habitually, so automatically, that we don't really notice much of the time that we're actually doing it. And so one of the ways that we can start to train our mind to not go into those troubling cycles of papancha over and over is to begin the day or begin the morning with some recitations or with some affirmations that help us kind of stake out how it is we want to feel, how it is we want to relate to the world. One of the phrases I use quite often is, it's not what's happening that's important, it's our relationship to what's happening that's important. And so this is kind of at the heart of what we're talking about here, is that each day when we get up, we have an opportunity to decide how it is we want to relate to the world around us. What our relationship to the people that we encounter, the places we go, the experiences we have, how that relationship is going to be. And so these morning recitations can be very helpful. The ones that I'm going to be reading and focusing on here are mostly Buddhist in origin, but at the same time they're secular, they're not religious, they just come from that Buddhist tradition. So you can use these. You could also come up with your own if you have some that are particularly helpful. But I find these to be very helpful in my own practice. So that's what I want to share with you a little bit tonight. Any questions so far on just this much? Feel free to ask, feel free to share. Anything anyone has, it's wonderful if you bring it up. So, morning recitations. What I look at this as is setting the tone for the day and setting my view and my intention. And so I brought a little prop in here tonight, this whiteboard, where I've listed the Noble Eightfold Path. And the first two, we normally start with the top one. The first two items on the Noble Eightfold Path are right view and then right intention. And so you can see how important they are in getting the cycle going. If you have a view of yourself, your experience, and the world around you that is going to be liberating, that's going to set you free, that's going to make you feel more peaceful, then you're setting yourself off in a way you're going to have a better day, is the bottom line. You're going to feel better about yourself. Other times you'll wake up in the morning and it's like, well, I'm mad about this, I'm running late, this is a problem, that's a problem. In that way, we're kind of establishing a view of the world that's going to be adversarial and it's going to be problematic for us. So we look at this really as just a choice. Is there a skillful way that I can get up in the morning and start my day by changing the way I look at things? And the answer is yes. And then once we've worked on our view, our understanding of things, then we can work on our intention, which is the second one. And then the other thing I'd say about this whole Noble Eightfold Path is that even though there's 8 aspects to this, or 8 spokes on the wheel, we really look at this as one thing. This is one thing for the purpose of training and understanding, but it has these 8 spokes. And like with a wheel, each spoke really supports the entire wheel. There's not one that's more important than the others. They're all essential. So, and I don't know if you guys can see, but this is what I'm referring to. So, Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention. Then we move into, and those are considered aspects of the path that are related to wisdom. Then there's right speech, right action, and livelihood. Right livelihood, those are considered parts of the path that have to do with ethical conduct. And then right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration have to do with cultivating wisdom in the mind and training the mind to work with you as an ally. So again,
Would you want to right intention? What would be a wrong intention?
Well, right intention would be if you go out with the intention of cultivating loving kindness, if you go out with the intention of cultivating compassion, in your interactions with people, if you go out with the intention of cultivating joy, or if you go out with the intention of cultivating equanimity. So those are the 4 Brahma-viharas that we talk about a lot. But if these are the basis of your intention, this is in the practice, we consider that skillful, and it means that your results are going to be positive. So skillful action brings skillful results. So that would be right intention. So the opposite, wrong intention, might be that we're going out with a degree of greed in the mind, or a degree of ill will or animosity or anger, or that we're going out with a sense of kind of delusion in the mind, that we're not seeing things as they really are, but we're seeing things through our conditioning. So that would be kind of an example of right intention versus wrong intention, if that makes sense. So that's a good question. Probably a lot of people wondering what that means.
Would wrong intention be like judgment, preconceived notions, that kind of thing too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything that really has some negativity attached to it, so often, yeah, we can go out and we're pretty much convinced that the people we're going to deal with are going to be a problem,
Yeah.
or and so these kinds of preconceived notions, yeah, they're really setting the stage for what's going to happen next.
Well, how about if when somebody does something nice to somebody, but they're really doing it not to be nice, but they want something else in return?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of a subtle one. I mean, the act itself might be good in that
It
you're
might
doing
appear
something
good,
to help.
But so the intention,
Right.
the act is good, but the intention is
Mhm.
for something else.
Yeah, and so for each person, it's one of those. It's a very personal thing. Each person, you have to reflect on what you're doing, what your motivation is behind that, or your intention, whatever your intention is behind that. If your intention is wholesome, the results will be wholesome. If the intention is unwholesome, the results will be unwholesome. And that's kind of the law of karma in the practice, just in a nutshell. The intention behind the action determines whether that action is beneficial or harmful. And it may not play itself out that way right then and there. Sometimes it takes a little while. But that's really the kind of the definition of karma.
Almost seems a
Story of
little
your
bit.
cutting,
What's that?
the guy getting cut, an intention that you tell?
Oh yeah. There's a story that I share. If you consider, you have a person with a sharp knife, razor sharp knife, and they go to another person and they plunge that knife into that person's abdomen, and that person dies as a result of that. Now, 2 different people did the same thing. One was a thief who wanted to steal this person's money, and so they stabbed them and killed them. The other, a surgeon who wanted to save this person's life. The action itself was identical in both cases. The intention was completely different. And is that the one you're referring to, Don?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's just a real good example of how the exact same action is, the difference is, what is the intention? What is the intention behind it? I had a situation personally where I made a pretty big error, moderate-sized error, a few weeks ago. And there was a person affected by it, and it was difficult for that person. It was painful for that person because I had made this mistake. my intention was not to do that. My intention was actually to be doing something good, but through an error, I made this mistake, made this person feel bad. So there I was with this person. I felt bad for making them feel bad, but I also knew that my intention was not that. And so there was a sort of, I didn't have that horrible feeling. It was not my intention. So there was sort of this objective, yes, I feel bad that I made this person feel bad, and I wish I hadn't done that. However, my intention was not to. And so what I was left with was, kind of a feeling of lightness about the whole thing. I still felt bad, but, there was a feeling of, yeah, I know what my intention was behind it. And so what a difference that makes when you're acting out of pure intention. Even if the results don't necessarily work out the way you had hoped, kind of like in the case of the doctor, his intention was to solve the health problem of the patient. Ultimately, the patient died, but the doctor's intention was to be, life-saving. And so very different in that, in the results of that. The suffering we experience ourselves as a result of wrong intention, we're the ones that are usually dealing with that most of all. Wrong intention, and we're the ones that pay the price. So, a morning recitation that, for me, this is kind of the bread and butter of the practice right here. So this might be something that you read and kind of contemplate, maybe as you have your cup of coffee in the morning before you leave for the day, or maybe before you sit down to meditate. So this would be to contemplate the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And we touched on the Eightfold Path a little bit here. It's important to note that in the Theravada tradition, which is what I teach, it holds that insight into the Four Noble Truths itself is liberating. So just insight into this Four Noble Truths, understanding it, having a real deep penetrating knowledge into what this means is liberating. So it's wonderful to study this. So the Four Noble Truths, and we'll talk about these and answer questions as we go. The first noble truth is the noble truth of suffering. We use the word suffering most often. In Pali, the word is dukkha. That word is translated in various ways. It's translated as suffering. It's translated as dis-ease. It's translated as stressfulness. It's translated as unsatisfactoriness. Words like that. So suffering kind of sounds like a major thing, which maybe it is. But it also, it runs the spectrum of lots of other different unpleasant emotional states of stress. So the first noble truth, this is the noble truth of suffering, that in birth there's suffering, and that in aging there is suffering. So like if you just think of a baby being born, the first thing that happens, they come out of their mom and they're suddenly thrust into this world of it's ice cold and it's different and it's bright lights and the baby's crying, and so there's some suffering with birth. Certainly the mother suffers with birth, but aging, there is suffering in aging, as I think probably we all know. To be united with what is displeasing is suffering. So having things happen to you that you don't want to have happen is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. So it's just talking about how there's these different aspects of our lives that are considered to be suffering, or dukkha. Now, in addition, it also recognizes that there's a lot of joy in life. There's a lot of happiness, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of wonderful things that happen, but the wonderful things that happen, the joyful things that happen, aren't really a problem. You know, those are okay. So what this is saying is, let's work on the stuff that's the problem. So that's why the stress is on the suffering. So some people read that and they misunderstand it, and they think that it's saying that it's a very pessimistic view of life in the world, but it really isn't. It's not saying everything is suffering. There's lots of joy, lots of love, lots of happiness, lots of wonderful things. There's also our own liberation, our own enlightenment from suffering. That is a very real thing. And so that's also a possibility in life. But there are these things that are suffering, and that's what causes us to suffer. So you could replace the word suffering in that first paragraph. You could replace that with the word stressful and just say birth is stressful, aging is stressful, illness is stressful, death is stressful, union with what is displeasing is stressful, separation from what is pleasing is stressful, not to get what one wants is stressful. So you don't have to just use that suffering word. Sometimes it helps us understand it a little more when we substitute a word there. So all of these different things are stressful. That makes sense so far, pretty much? I think everybody kind of agrees with that. Then the second noble truth. This is the noble truth of the origin of this suffering or this dukkha. It is this craving that we have which leads to re-becoming, and I'll explain that, accompanied by things like delight and lust, these positive feelings we get from things that we crave. Seeking delight here and seeking delight there, that's craving for sensual pleasures. Craving for becoming, craving for disbecoming. So craving for becoming, it might be, I want to feel a certain way. That would be craving for becoming. I want to feel happy. That would be craving for becoming. I want to be recognized by people around me as intelligent. That would be craving for becoming. So these are kind of mental states that we're craving. Or for disbecoming. I want to be separated from painful experiences. I want to be separated from things that make me angry. So disbecoming. So what this, in a nutshell, what the second noble truth is saying is that within each one of us, we have something called the wanting mind. We want things to be a certain way, and whenever we want things to be different than they actually are, there's a subtle feeling or an intense feeling of dis-ease in the body and in the mind, right? So if I want something that isn't here, and I really intensely want it, then I'm not going to feel very content here. I'm going to be kind of haunted by the desire for whatever the thing is, right? And sometimes that's something very simple and silly, like just I'm in the mood to hear a song, or I'm in the mood to have a yummy bowl of ice cream, or something like that. Or it could be, I need to have this other person in my life give me a certain amount of attention that makes me feel loved. Or I want this person who rejected me to take me back, right? So these are probably all experiences that we've all had in one way or another throughout the course of our lives. Things as simple as just wanting something fun or something delicious to eat or to have a fun experience. And it goes all the way to, I want to be loved, I want to be respected, I want to be treated a certain way. I want to have certain things that make me feel like I've accomplished certain levels of achievement in my life. I have self-esteem and these kinds of things, right? So it's to become aware of this wanting mind is behind all of that. And whenever the wanting mind is active, there is dis-ease in the body. And from an evolutionary perspective, this is also true, because it's this wanting mind that gets us to act, right? So if you were hungry, and let's just say there's no wanting mind, well, what would be the motivation to eat? You know, if you were hungry and you didn't feel like getting up and getting something to eat, you wouldn't eat. And so the wanting mind is behind kind of this keeping our bodies alive, keeping our gene pool going so that we can, reproduce and have children. So the wanting mind has a real evolutionary, biological aspect to it. But again, looking at the wanting mind, it oftentimes goes far beyond just, well, I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need shelter, I need to stay warm, I desire a mate. A lot of times it goes way beyond that, and there's all these other things. So what happens when you come up with an idea like, I want to be liked? I mean, then that's a pretty abstract thing. How do you know when that's been achieved? What qualifies as being liked enough to be satisfied by that? So this is really what the second truth is saying, is that all of this wanting, all this craving for things that aren't here, craving for states of being that aren't in existence, all of these things, it's not saying that they're all bad, but it's saying the craving is the thing that makes us feel like suffering. And so you can imagine for a moment, just in like this perfect, somehow imaginary world, that you did not crave or want anything. Let's just say that you were perfectly satisfied with everything you had. You didn't need anything to be different than it is. How would that feel? I mean, that would be perfect peace, perfect peacefulness. So on the other hand, if you imagine this world in which most of us live, which is, I need all kinds of different things, I desire this, I desire that, and until I get those things, sometimes I can't feel satisfied or rest. So this is what the second noble truth is talking about. The origin of suffering is this craving or this desire or this wanting. And it's not saying that all the things we want are bad, it's just saying that's what causes this feeling of suffering, of dukkha. Any questions on that second one?
I have a little bit of, I mean, not an issue with it, but the balance of that total peace, like how do you, where's like creativity and that motivation and that drive to want to be like create, I don't know, I gotta look some that, because it's, because that numbing, I mean, it's kind of peaceful and numb and everything's, you guys know what I'm talking about?
Boring.
Kind of like the little get up and go, like, I mean,
it's-
you shouldn't, I don't know.
It kind of like, where's the juice?
Yeah.
If you're letting go of the
I mean,
desire
it's-
for everything.
It's creating, which creating is everything, and
Mhm.
people really need to be creative, they really do, and I don't mean just
Right.
making, painting, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
From a garden to pets, that whatever it is that you do to be, people really need to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
To have
Oh,
some kind of creation, that, whatever that might be.
I agree. I think that's built into us, and
Because that's in our DNA.
yeah,
We're
that's
wired,
in our
and if we don't
DNA.
have that, maybe that's where the depression and stuff is, I don't know, but
right.
how
But-
do you kind of balance that with,
The difference is, again, it goes back to whatever is wholesome or whatever is unwholesome. So, like, an example, using myself again is just kind of the example because it's easy. Each week I try to put together, a teaching that is useful to people. And so as I do that, it's not really like, boy, I want to be perceived as smart, or I want to be perceived as, being some brilliant scholar. But really my motivation is I want to put together a document and a class that's going to help other people feel better. And so there's this, it's wholesome desire, right? Or you might want to make a really wonderful meal for somebody's birthday, you know, and have them like it. It's important to you to have them like it. You know, again, these are wholesome desires, so they're really not, you know, they're not problems. So there's a lot of desires that come up that do cause suffering, a lot of desires that come up that we can fulfill them, we can work with them, and there's no suffering to them whatsoever because there's no attachment, right? There's no craving or clinging. So maybe that makes some sense to address that. So the noble truth of the origin of suffering is this craving or this wanting mind. For me, that wanting mind is just a really good way to look at it. Anytime my mind gets into I want something, then there's a little bit of feeling of I'm not in balance anymore. Now I want something, and I'm going to be at least a little kind of bothered by it until I do something about it, or until I don't want it anymore. And sometimes there'll be things we want, and we want them intensely, and then after a while we discover, oh, I guess I don't want that. I've changed my mind about it. So you just think the wanting mind is the thing where that suffering is coming from.
And isn't it, because these are the noble truths, isn't it, it's just kind of a description of the human condition, that we're going to have suffering,
Mm-hmm.
but we have some choices within that by doing the Eightfold Path.
Right.
So it's not that these are a judgment, good or bad, they are.
Yeah, it's almost like
I mean,
talking about the laws of physics in a
right.
way.
I mean, we're going to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to strive.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be depressed. We're going to be, you know, we have a range of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to be aware when we start feeling the consequences of those.
Yeah.
That we have some choice.
Exactly, and it's our relationship to those things that makes the difference.
Right.
So, yeah, so all of these things are like facts of life.
Facts of life.
Yep, they're
the human
they're,
condition.
Yeah, the truth of the human condition, that there's suffering, and that the suffering. Now, we're not talking about pain. We're talking about suffering. Suffering comes as a result of craving, clinging, and aversion. It's this wanting mind that turns simple wants into sources of suffering. So then it gets into the
continuously remind us of it.
Right.
Yeah,
It doesn't, you have to continuously.
You do, and so that's why, in the morning recitations, for me, it's really the first one, is to kind of remember these fundamental truths about the condition of life. That there's a lot of great things that are going to happen to me today, but there's also going to be things around suffering. And that having observed my own suffering for years and years, it's usually when I think about things that are not happening that I wish would happen or had happened differently, that the suffering comes up. So that's the craving or the clinging, right? So if I think, oh, there was a relationship I was in and that relationship came to an end, and if every day I just think to myself, oh, I need to get that back, I wish it hadn't ended, well, there's a huge amount of suffering in that. But if you were to look at that and say, yeah, there was a relationship that was important to me, it came to an end and now it's over, and that's the reality of it, and so now I need to move on with my life. I mean, these are two different approaches to the exact same thing, and one is going to produce tremendous suffering, whereas the other one is going to produce some degree of freedom, and, maybe some suffering, but not as much. So, yeah, so it is being kind of constantly aware of this dynamic.
I just had something happen before I came tonight. When I think about all this, the modern word that comes to my mind is expectations.
Mm-hmm.
If I have an expectation for myself, an expectation for others, you're going to be disappointed. And my sister just shared with me that she was really upset because she put something on Facebook.
Because what?
She put something on Facebook
Oh.
and she only got four likes.
Oh.
What
4
is
likes.
wrong with people that they? And I said, George, I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and I just, you just gotta let go of that expectation. And that's kind of what we're talking about
Yeah.
here. Is just being mindful of the
Right.
expectation or the suffering, and just trying to let it go a little bit,
Yeah.
and get rid of the I.
You're exactly right.
Get rid of the me.
Like I said a couple of minutes ago, if you just come up with the concept, I want to be liked, and I want to be liked.
Why do you think they put that on Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. So, boy, 4 likes. That's like a year of likes for me. I'll take it. See, it's relative. It's relative too. So, but here's the third one, and this is kind of the good news. It says that the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering. So this is where suffering goes away. It's the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. This is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And then it goes into the eightfold truth, so or the eightfold path. But what this is saying is that if you can identify the cause of suffering being this craving, in other words, our relationship to the world around us, our ideas about the things that we need in order to be satisfied and happy, which when we're having them always seem very valid and very real, but quite often if we look back at them years later, we realize, yeah, that really wasn't important at all, or that was actually a source of suffering in my life, and I thought it was a source of something good, right? So what this is saying is that if you can understand the cause of suffering as being craving, then you can also understand that by unwinding that craving, that you remove the cause of suffering. And so what is left is happiness. What is left, and this is an important thing to understand from the teaching, is that what's inside of us, if we were to get rid of all the junk and all the ideas we have that we're not good enough or not beautiful enough or not, whatever it is, if you got rid of all of that and just got to the point of your true nature, what that is naturally compassionate, loving, blissful, and peaceful. That's who you are behind all or underneath all the junk. And so over the course of time, because of the way we're taught and conditioned and the things we grow up with, we have all these ideas. Well, I can't be happy unless I get good grades, and then I can't be happy unless I get into a good college, and then I can't be happy until I get a good job, and then I can't be happy until I get a good title, and I can't be happy until I get a good mate, and that good mate has to look a certain way, and they have to respond to me in a certain way, and my neighbors have to respect me, and they have to look at me in a certain way, which means I need a house that looks like this, and I need a car that looks like that. You know what I mean? These are just, it's just a cycle. It's just a cycle. But each and every one of those things is really just an imaginary, it's just an idea that we have. It's just an idea that somehow we got that if we have this, everything is going to be fine.
Yeah, right.
And we all know that advertising is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry, and so they take advantage of the fact that human beings tend to crave. Human beings tend to have this craving, and they know that when you're craving, that you're not going to rest until you get whatever it is you're craving. So whether it's the pizza commercials on TV, or the clothing, you look a certain way, or look at this, if you drive in this car, you feel so good about yourself and all these kinds of things. Well, I can tell you that from my experience, I've been able to accomplish a lot of stuff and made a 6-figure income and had a lot of money and had a good title and all this kind of stuff, and it did not help. It did not make me feel better. And when I started to realize that this was not, these things were not the ingredients of happiness, when I started to realize that, then there was a tremendous amount of suffering, because like now I've got all this stuff. And what do you do with it? You know, the big house out in the country, the cars and the car loans, and you know, just all this stuff. You know, how do you unwind that? So there's a tremendous amount of suffering around these things.
But I think you have to appreciate, I think that's the point, and I just feel like, I don't know why people get so into the whole thing with all that, because in the meantime, while you're chasing all this stuff, every day is going by. You had an opportunity every day to appreciate something or to be kind to somebody,
Yeah.
and you threw that in the trash.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like that
It's
time.
sad.
That time is wasted, and
Yeah,
we lose
totally
our
wasted.
opportunity. And so, and as we get into this deeper, what it starts to talk about is that, yeah, really where satisfaction is found, where deep and true happiness is found, is that when we start to realize these things are the causes of suffering, that through our meditation practice that we can kind of clean this out. We kind of just start to move all this stuff out. And then sometimes the question comes up, well, what's left then? If I get rid of all the stuff that I want and kind of all my motivators and the things that keep me going every day, what's left? But that's where we fill the void with metta, loving kindness, with this compassion and this joy. And that's what floods in and fills this space. So we get rid of these artificial ideas of who we think we are and what we need in order to be lovable and successful and attractive and all these other things. We start to get rid of all of that, and then in the void we cultivate loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And so then you're left with something that is truly wonderful and isn't dependent upon all these causes, isn't dependent on things going right in your job, isn't dependent on who wins the election, but it is my interaction with any given person at any given time, if that's based on compassion, loving kindness, appreciative joy, which is a really neat but subtle thing, which means that you're not just saying when good things happen to me, that's joy, but when good things happen to you, that's joy. That's my joy too. That joy is joy. So whenever something good happens to someone else, through mindfulness, I can take that on and say, wow, that's a wonderful thing. So now I'm joyful. I see someone else win the lottery, and I can be happy for them. Maybe not as happy as if I won the lottery, but happy. So it's a real thing. We're at about 8:27, so we should probably end it, and we'll pick this up next week, and we'll continue this conversation. But I encourage you to read the handout on the morning recitations and just kind of study the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and then we'll finish this up, this part next week, and then we'll finish we should be able to get through the rest of this handout next week. But there's some really interesting things here. So what I would suggest to you is in the week ahead is to maybe read through this and then to just start to be aware of these places in your life where craving is coming up and is causing this dis-ease. And maybe a few places where you could let go of it and watch that dis-ease dissipate. And you'll start to see it. You know, it happens in all sorts of simple, subtle ways. All sorts of simple, subtle ways.
Can I mention something that sounds really weird, but
Yeah.
I'll forget about it next week. So I'm a nurse. I always hated anything to do with cardiac stuff, but the hospital forced me to take a course. So I'm like, all right. The most fascinating thing that I found out, which is like an analogy of this, is if you always see in movies and you see this flat line, you can't shock anybody when they're flatlined. You have to irritate the heart. You have to cause some suffering, if you want to call that. Then you can intervene. If they're completely flat, you can't do it. So to me, it was sort of an analogy of you need that little bit of suffering. You need a little bit of being uncomfortable or whatever. And then you have something to hold on to. It's like holding on to a slippery slope you can't do, but if there's something there that, you know, is distressful, or then you have something to work with. And I've felt many a time that that's why people get sick or whatever. You can look at that as suffering, or as you can look at it as, wow, maybe I need to listen to my body. Maybe I need time to, maybe there's something here I'm supposed to be getting. And look at that as an opportunity. Most people don't.
Yeah.
But I think there's a huge opportunity when we have suffering. We don't realize it. I think it's very important to have that. You don't appreciate the good if you don't have a little bit of that sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think one of the things that points that out is that is the first noble truth, you know, kind of the cornerstone of the whole thing, that there is this thing called suffering, and that we all experience it. And that from that, all the rest of our life experiences come. So, and again, it's not saying that all of it is wrong or bad, but what it's saying is that this is the result of this. So, kind of like the laws of physics, where it's like, you know, is gravity good or bad? Well, it's neither. It's just a thing. You know, it's just a fact. So, kind of the same way. So, yeah, appreciate that. Well, why don't we just take a minute here before we go? What a great group, and I love the feedback and the conversation, and all of this is just wonderful, because it helps us to all get it. And it also, here's the other neat thing, is that we all have the same, you know, basic thing going on in our lives. We all have our struggles, we all have our fears, and, you know, we all have the things that we're trying to work through. But we all have it, you know? And so just to be around people who, and so there's this wonderful loving acceptance of all of us with our imperfections and our fears and all of that. And so that's kind of the idea behind Sangha, which is this group of people who support each other in healthy, wholesome ways. And it's just sort of a non-judgmental place where we can all come and just, you know, work on this. So, such a wonderful thing. So, well, we'll end with just the recitation of the 4 Brahma-viharas, which I will do for you. So I just invite you to close your eyes and just sort of open your heart and feel this. So these are the 4 highest states of human consciousness. And I usually start with compassion. You can start with them in different orders, and that's okay. But I like to start with compassion because I think about how one thing I can relate to in my own life is my own experience of suffering, and how difficult and painful that is. And so when I become aware of other beings that are also suffering, I can really feel that compassion for them, because I know their suffering to them feels just like mine does to me. And so it's like, wow, there's that connection. So we start off by cultivating karuna, which is compassion, and we say, may all beings be free from suffering and from the causes of suffering. And then from there we move to, may all beings be surrounded by love and kindness. And then from there, may all beings be joyful and happy. And then finally, may all beings be equanimous, free, peaceful. This also means at a stage where they are free from craving, which is the causing of suffering. So may all beings be equanimous, peaceful, and free. And may all of you sharing this room tonight, I'm so grateful for your presence. May you all be truly, truly happy. Thank you all so much. Blessings, everybody. Come back next week. Continue. You're welcome to hang around. There's no need to rush out of here. Oh, thank you. Feel free to hang out and talk and just
get home before it snows.
Okay. No need to rush.
Why, is it going, it's supposed to be coming, isn't it?
Huh?
Is it coming?
Is snow coming?
Well, it's supposed to Thursday, but now I think they've changed it to rain. I don't know. Who knows?
Well,
You know, Cheryl's got an appointment next week.
Huh?
She's got an appointment.
Yeah.
Do you want me to call you and pick you up?
No, that's.
If you ever need, you know, a ride or a ride
last
home.
take care, Don. Is that your jacket there?
Yeah, because what are you gonna do when she's
We'll lose that. Bye, Norma. You take care.
Alrighty, alrighty. I'll give you,
Okay.
I'll give you my home.
The idea of planting anything, it's just putting it all